Hey guys, today I'm going to be doing a quick drawing of Jacob here on the left hand side, and I'll just be using the default Procreate brushes and we'll see how we get along. The background I set up with a canvas texture. I've got a separate video on this that I'll link in if you'd like to have a go at creating your own texture background yourself. Otherwise a plain background will do just fine. I have made it a little bit darker because the picture on the left hand side is quite dark, so I think I'm really going to go in with the highlights today. The brushes that I'm using are the default charcoal brushes. I'm going to start off with a 4B. The only thing I've noticed with these is they're not very sensitive and you have to push quite hard, which I really don't like because I have quite a, I guess, gentle touch as an artist, so that's something that feels very artificial for me. What you can do if you struggle with this is just to change the pressure curve that is in the tool here. On the top, if you click on the spanner and then pressure and smoothing, you can set the curve, and if you push this more to the top left, then it just makes your brush a lot more sensitive, which is makes drawing a lot less painful, and you know, you don't get sore wrists, you don't scratch your screen, you don't push too hard. So that is just one good tip when using these brushes. I'm going to start off just looking at the picture on the left. Now I think I just want to draw the rough shape of his face. Now I'm leaning quite far back. I'm not trying to make these lines accurate, I'm just trying to get a rough idea for the shapes and the masses in his face. And I've drawn a long layer. Let's try again. Don't do that. Make sure you keep drawing on a separate layer from your background. I do draw all on one layer. I just find it a little bit easier. But I will keep my background separate because you still want to be erased in without losing your background texture. So there's really nothing particularly precise here. I'm following the lines along, so the shoulders are roughly here. I've got the rough shape of his face. It does help if you get them the same size, because then you can look left to right and compare. Now, one thing I always try and do is keep the drawing quite loose, and there's a few different ways you can do that. You can squint at the drawing on the left hand side and just go for blocking the masses. You can hold your pencil right at the back so that you don't have a lot of control. You can lean back, so I'm really leaning back in my seat. I'm not trying to get beautiful pretty lines, I'm just kind of roughly blocking in shapes. Another thing that's quite useful at this stage is to really look at the face on the left hand side and say what is unique and distinct about this face and exaggerate that. So maybe he's got his eyelid on the left hand side quirked a little bit, so we can maybe exaggerate that a little bit. Maybe he's got his nose is quite high up, so we can exaggerate that a little bit. What I find is, as I draw faces, we fix things. So if a face is turned left, I'm just gonna, just take a break from my flow and set the eraser to be the same brush. So the 4B compressed. As we draw a picture, we fix things. So as an example, if we've got a face that's turned 3/4 length, people have a tendency to move features that way and try and automatically, without even thinking about it, turn the face around. So by exaggerating some things, then you allow yourself some room to fix drawings, like subconsciously, without losing the lightness. So he's also got a very sharp chin, comes out. Got quite a small nose. not very pronounced. It's a bit, you know, Philtrum? I just made that up. Maybe. He's got quite a small mouth. I mean, as in it's quite narrow. These are all things that if you do any illustration work, you'll probably be able to do this already, because you know people who do illustration are good at kind of picking out features on people's faces and exaggerating them. I just find doing that in traditional drawings as well really kind of gives it an element of something a bit interesting. So obviously you don't want the level of exaggeration that you might see with a caricaturist, but having an element of that often makes a really interesting picture. So with the eyes, I don't try and place the eyeballs. I am just basically just going from underneath the bottom lid here all the way around to the eyebrow. I'm constantly measuring and comparing distances, so from his chin to the middle of his mouth is here. Normally this line here is halfway between, but he's got quite a long chin, so we just want to make sure that we're keeping that distance right. Another thing I often get wrong is the ear, so let's just make sure we measure across. So the top of his ear that is visible, it's sort of in line with the corner of his eye. Obviously we don't have the corner of his eye though, so maybe it's halfway down his nose. So about there. And then the bottom of his ear is in line with his top lip. You also want to get the angle right as well. So the ear is like a mug on a handle, sorry, a handle mug. So if we think of the mug as the back line of the chin, then the mug handle of the ear hangs off that. So we just need to make sure it's lined up properly. Right, now to go with the eraser and pick out any light areas that I should not have lines in. Light area there. Cool, okay. So I think I'm going to go for 3 shades here. I'm not going to change the colour of my pencil, but I will go over certain areas in order to build up a little bit more tone. So his eye sockets, his nose, and his hair all dark. If you see something wrong, fix it straight away. And his face here is kind of in a medium tone, I would say. think I've got this distance here too far. I can pick that limit. Right, so I was talking earlier about how we turn people around and we make this, for 3/4 pose, we often get that outside edge too far along. I think I've done this here. There's a few ways you can counter for this. You can measure distance, so I could measure the distance from the right side of his nose here to the edge of his face and compare that distance to, say, that side of his nose and somewhere else, so I can see that distance there is roughly the same distance of him to his eyeball. It's also roughly about the same width as his mouth, so I can use that as a way of measuring it. After a while, you can kind of just look and see what looks wrong. Everything's fixable, so this is the blocking stage where we've not got to the point where we're happy that everything is in roughly the right spot. We're just trying to get some shapes and tones down to get ourselves started. I think I'm just going to put this down a little bit. The thing you can do is just zoom out. I think that does have a habit, especially for these early stages, of putting everything in a bit more perspective. So I have not got his face shape right. I have made his face too narrow here, so we'll get nipping it in until we're happy. So the problem with this is everything is relative, so it looks like his mouth is in the wrong place, but it could just be that I've got his jaw in the wrong place. I quite like his mouth, so I'm going to fix his jaw for now. See if I can make it work. Really quite light up here on the side of his face, so let's try and bring some of that in. It might be what's throwing my drawing off. When I draw, I use a very light pressure, so I just try and kind of building up these areas of tone. I'm really just rubbing the corner of my pencil onto the sheet, onto the iPad. It really helps here if you've got a Paperlike or matte screen protector. I don't actually use a Paperlike, I use an alternative called Belmont, which I got from Amazon, but I think any matte screen protector, I think, really makes a massive difference. It's kind of a must for traditional artists. Otherwise your pen just ends up slipping all over the place and you can't really get control that you need to over the drawing. Don't forget you can draw with your eraser as well. And if it's too white, you can always come in with your charcoal and just layer with some tone just to kind of knock it back a little bit. I also like to run my razor over my really dark areas because I don't like it when they're just too black and like untextured. I like to see texture everywhere when I'm drawing. Quite light here in his head, isn't it? I think it must be in a bathroom or something because I can see, well, something with multiple lights. So he's got light coming in from this direction here because I can see the brightest part of his face is along this side of his face. It's really quite dark here, but then he's got a bit of light here as well. So I don't know if that's like a bit of bounce light from something else or he's got multiple sources of light. I think it makes things quite tricky. And his ear is quite light. I mean, it's not that important that you know where the light is coming from when you're just doing a photo study because you don't have to make decisions about lighting or just observing. But I think sometimes just looking for the light and thinking about it for a minute just kind of does help a little bit sometimes. Quite a pointy chin. You can see I haven't really done anything about his eyes at all. One of my YouTuber followers pointed out that you can use a double tap to change. That's the top tip. I don't know why I forget about that a lot of the time, and I think sometimes it doesn't quite work properly, and that kind of annoys me. So I don't use it as much as I probably should. There you go. I think because I've done without it for so long that like I'm changing between the two without remembering that you can use that shortcut. But if you're new to digital, then maybe have a go with that because it'll probably save you a bit of time. Like me trying to unlearn my bad habits. Like leaving eyes till the very last minute. I'm not sure it's such a bad habit though doing that because sometimes the drawings are pretty good. And you can always add eyes later. Right, shall we do an overlay? It's really funny, I don't usually bother with overlays when I'm not recording videos. But for some reason I quite like to do them with these YouTube videos. I think what it is like when I'm drawing by myself, I'll go away a lot and I'll come back and I'll sort of break the process down. And I'll have build in like breaks. I guess I could do that when I'm recording a video, but I just like to kind of get them out in one go. And I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I just draw a picture and I'm quite happy with it, but then I come back to it after a break and it just looks like a Picasso. Not in a good way, like in a the facial features all over the place kind of way. So I think overlaying the photo ref is a good way of just avoiding humiliation. I mean, sometimes I like the picture so much that I think overlaying it would actually spoil it, because I've done some kind of like quirky exaggeration thing or something, and I know it's not like 100% accurate, but I'm kind of really liking the way it looks. So sometimes when I do that, I will decide not to overlay. And I also don't tend to overlay further along in the process, because at that point stuff is kind of pretty locked in. It's never too late to fix things, but it is certainly a lot easier in the early stages. 2 minds about whether to draw that cigarette. Right. Gosh. I know, it's definitely not right, is it? It's got this kind of like deep set, wonky eyes, which are quite cool. That's not right, is it? Let's do a measurement. Maybe there. Jeez, who knows? Let's have a look. So I'm about to do the overlay in a sec because it's pretty close. We don't want anything too dark or too developed at this stage. But we do want consistency of tone, and we want everything to be roughly in the right place. Those eyes dark. Yeah. I mean, I don't think this is amazing, because I think I made his eyes are completely wrong. I think people have smaller eyes than you think, especially blokes. And if you make, it's easy to make them too big. I mean, obviously, unless you're doing an illustration or something, in which case it's like a stylistic choice. But if you are actually wanting to do like an accurate portrait, just be careful of not making the eyes too big. Because often I actually think it makes people look off. Right. Pretty sure those eyes are wrong. It's like really unsure about like how much to fix now. Right. At the moment this isn't looking like Jacob at all. But the funny thing about likenesses is you can have everything like so close, but it could still be all wrong. I guess it's his mouth that's really throwing me off here, you know. Keep my camera to see if that gives me a clue. Oh, I was using the eraser there. Jeez. Right. Okay, its mouth is. So this thing with his mouth where he's like, I don't know if it's because he's like, I'm just doing a weird face right now, you can't see it, like pursing his lips a little bit. Which is why he's got this weird shape in his, not weird, but like distinctive shape in his mouth. It's kind of really pinched in. You can get that. Oh. Let's do an overlay and see how bad it is in terms of accuracy. You know what, before we do that, let's do one more thing. Let us have a layer and see if we can add in some lights and see if that helps at all. So you can get rather than like focusing on the dark areas, I'm focusing on the light areas. Now when you're doing this in real life, you've got to be really careful about like putting chalk on top of charcoal because they just kind of mix together and look really muddy and weird. And really, if you're putting chalk down, you don't need charcoal there because it's a light area, not a dark area. So if you're trying to put chalk down on a dark charcoal, you know that something you've done isn't right. Definitely that side of the mouth there, I think. The way I've got around it here is just I've kept that chalk on a separate layer. It means you can turn it on and off. You're not getting the two colours mixed in. Like, I like to keep my charcoal, I like to keep my charcoal drawing all the same colour so that when you start adding different colours, then you get like kind of quite a weird effect. So just use one shade of charcoal, and if you want a lighter colour, you're just applying less pressure or you're erasing some of that. I want to erase that. That's kind of what I was talking about with the way he's pursing his lips. Maybe this is a bit. I mean, it looks like someone. I'm not sure it looks like Jacob, but I'm not sure I rub out anywhere with the chalk. Yep, I'm just going to switch that off for a bit. have a look, see where we are. So photo, boom. Earlier, this is. Got to be careful when you do this, because if you don't do it right, then your drawing could actually be correct and you end up like fixing everything unnecessarily. But I think that is pretty good. So let's see where it got wrong. So the hairline I got wrong. It's okay, I mean that stuff usually comes in after a while anyway. I got his nose wrong. That's why his lips look weird. His chin is pretty bang on. Shoulder's a bit high. So we've got the shoulder a bit high here. His ears a bit high. Actually got his eye mostly in the right place, so maybe needs to come in a smidge there, but that's all stuff that's easy to fix. Got his eyebrows in the right place. Yeah, it's just his hair. I think I've just overdrawn his hair. And then obviously his nose is wrong. And I think that's because I moved everything a little bit, like I moved his mouth this way and I moved his face that way, and I think what it was is I just made his face a little bit too wide, and what I could have done is just fixed his face rather than fix his face and his mouth. But because I moved his mouth to fix his face, I think now the nose is in the wrong place. But yeah, pretty good. And now I'm removing that and I've seen the underlay. I'm like, oh yes, obviously his nose is in the wrong place. Let's fix that now. In a bit. I've actually drawn Jacob a few times. He's got quite an interesting face to draw. I haven't really watched any of his films though. My biggest tip is like don't erase too hard, because I said this before in another video, so apologies if you heard me rabbit on about this before, but when we draw with charcoal it gets stuck in the grain of the paper. I mean, even if you're using a fairly light charcoal like fine charcoal, it gets stuck in the paper, and you're just kind of building it up through an iterative process where you're slowly like adjusting and moving things around. So if you want your charcoal Procreate drawings to look like traditional charcoal, you need to make sure that you replicate those same techniques. So draw all the same layer, use a light hand, build up tone. Don't, if you need to move things around, don't use liquify, just gently erase and redraw. So like if you're really kind of quite disciplined about, you know, taking exactly the same approach as you do when you're doing a charcoal drawing, then you should kind of get the same results. Well, with some practice, obviously. So far all we've used is our pen and our eraser. My advice is to hold off from doing any blending until right at the end, when you're just nudging your drawing, because less is more. So I'm pretty happy with how this is looking and kind of the vibe. I don't know, it's kind of got almost like a cutout vibe. I'm even in two minds about whether I would like to bring in any of those light tones that I was playing with earlier. Part of me just wants to just stick with this quite dark drawing. I like really erasing into my edges and kind of building up some cool variety. You really need to be good at using your eraser just as much as your pencil if you want a good result as well. Leaving some bits that are really kind of quite rough. If there's like a pencil mark that you really like, just be really like disciplined with yourself. Pencil mark, you know, brush mark, whatever. Be really disciplined with yourself and say, I'm going to leave that mark there, I'm not going to erase it. It takes a lot of practice, but the best painters and drawers, that's what they do. And I think when we see a drawing that has quite like free messy areas, like untouched areas, part of us knows. I don't know how. And we can add those elements in towards the end, but the good thing about if you're doing it as you go along, then it's just much more efficient, because maybe there's only like one mark in like 20 that you like enough to just leave it. But if you spot those when they happen, then you don't have to kind of try and artificially create them afterwards. So if you're quite happy where you are, and I am quite happy where I am, what you can do is create a duplicate of your layer. So just make sure you swipe left and select. Now if I ever want to go back, pardon me, if I ever want to go back, I've got it there. And this gives me some more freedom to just kind of be a bit creative, which is quite nice really, because I think with digital mediums we're just a little bit more careful, because when you do something that you like, there's always this nervous element that you'll mess it up. And I think with digital, you can just let that fear go a little bit. Because you've always got it. I mean, it is, if you haven't come out of your file, then you always can undo. And if you keep backups, then you can always revert those. I actually quite like working from low resolution pictures, because it stops you from getting too much into the details, because you physically can't, they're not there in your reference picture. One question I sometimes get is, where do I get my reference pictures from? The answer to that really depends on what I'm using the pictures for. If it's just for a photo study, then I have like a Pinterest board where I look for inspiration pictures, and then I use that to find pictures. For the smudge, let's use one of our charcoal brushes for our smudge. Oh, no, not the charcoal brush. Let's go default charcoal brush. Fine charcoal looks nice and wispy. Let's do that one. I don't even know why I was using a smudge there because it's not really necessary. Still kind of fixing the drawing a little bit, trying to like figure out some of those drawing elements. Looking quite carefully at my edges. I've not got his mouth right. Sounds like a very distinctive mouth. I'm totally not doing it justice right now. Nose kind of comes up like this. Yeah, I know it looks a bit weird at the moment, but it's fine. Kind of tempted to leave this little, is it a cigarette or is it like a toothpick out together? I don't know if his like mouth would not make sense then. Let's have a look. So the most annoying thing about drawing is you get something and then it just goes away and you're like, where did it go? What did I do? It was fine a minute ago. What just happened? I think part of like getting good at art is just to keep pushing through at that stage until it comes back. Just looking at the overall tones, just like I'm not really happy with them, they're not quite right. I do like critique sometimes. If anyone's interested, just drop me a DM on Instagram. I just kind of critique on demand, so like someone will just send me their pictures and I'll record like a 15 or 30 minute video where I just kind of draw over their work. And a mistake quite a lot of people make is something called over modelling, where where someone will do a beautiful drawing, but then there'll be part of the drawing, like let's say the white of the eyes, when you're drawing the white of the eyes, you go, oh, that's really white, and you'll make it really, really white like this, because that's what you're seeing. But actually, without really comparing that colour there to other parts of the drawing, and then what you end up with is a drawing that just doesn't look quite right. And it's so normal. I do it, I've done it. It's just the way that our eyes constantly adjust and the way our brain tricks us. So it really actually does take quite a long time to just kind of overrule that instinct and kind of work around it. But I think it's something that if you're aware of is something that you do, then you can kind of adjust for it. And I do that as well. So it's always really important to kind of move back and just look at your tones all over the picture and just say, is the hierarchy of tone right? So if I was to draw this picture on the left in just 4 colours, like which areas would be the brightest colour? And obviously it'd be his t-shirt, but let's just focus on his face. So which areas of his face would I make the brightest white? And it would probably be this bit of his forehead, the bridge of his nose, this bit of his nose there, around his face, maybe his chin here and here, maybe there, but they're not as bright as this area, so maybe even that area would take a kind of step down in the hierarchy. And then the next lightest area, what's that? This maybe around his nose, maybe is the areas of his chin. And then like your next mid-tone is maybe most of his face, all the way around his nose here. And then you've got another darker tone around his neck and around the edge of his chin, maybe on his cheek here, maybe under his eyebrow. So it's like that, it's trying to like constantly compare everything to other parts of the picture. And if you want to make an area darker or lighter, just say, am I going too far? Like, start off by just taking one step down in colour, and can make sure you compare it to other parts of the drawing so you're not overdoing it. I think that's why the blocking is so helpful, because a lot of it is just keeping your lights and your darks separate, which isn't so easy when you're doing a drawing like this. And I think the blocking approach really does rely on good lighting. And if you don't have like a picture that's lit with strong areas of light and shadow, it's quite difficult to take a blocking approach, I think. It's like one of those things that's good in theory, but doesn't work in all situations. Kind of liking the vibe of this. It looks a little bit like spray painty. Someone sent me their artwork that they'd done for my video before, and it had that cool effect on. It almost looked like it had been like spray painted. Right. The problem here is I've got it in the wrong place. What the heck is that? Like Bobby. You know, I was hating these pens before, but actually changing the pressure has really helped, and I like them a lot more now. shouldn't really be pressing hard. If you have to press really hard to make any mark, then you're not going to be able to get that build up of texture by just doing the rubbing technique. So yeah, it's really quite important to get the pressure set well. I think part of the reason I like the Lane Drawers brush set, which is the one I usually use, but it's a paid for brush set, is because it is so sensitive. Like the slightest mark, it just boom, it picks it up, and which can make it quite difficult as a fairly new artist, maybe, just because it's so dynamic. It's can be quite difficult to work with, I think. So I always like I recommend the brushes, but I kind of recommend them with warnings that they don't work for everyone. But actually, I'm quite liking this brush. Right, talking about over modelling, that is exactly what I've done with his cheek here. So his cheek is next to a white t-shirt, and it's also next to a highlight around the side of his face, so it looks quite dark, but it is not as dark as the bottom of his chin here, so I shouldn't have made it dark on his face. And in doing that, I've really thrown the drawing off, because actually it's the same colour as the background really, and I know we don't have a grey background here, so we can't kind of lose that edge with the same effect, but I might just lose that altogether. But I beat up to about it. Decisions. Have a lot of body fat in his face there, so it's this is the stuff that's time consuming, is like building up, replicating the shifts in tone that you see on a drawing. But those are what tell us about the person's face just as much as like having the lines in the right place. Because if you have the shading right, then that tells you about the volume of the person's face, like, you know, do they have thin cheeks? Do they have body fat on their face? You know, where their cheekbones are, that's all in the shading really. So sometimes you can have everything in the right place, but you've still not got a likeness, and that is because there's something in the shading which is telling your brain that something about a person is different to the photo you see. It's sometimes good to do pencil drawings because you don't have to worry about that so much. I mean, unless you're doing lots of shading, but like a contour pencil drawing. He's got quite a lot of bounce light under his face. I think it's the light bouncing off of his t-shirt. Not really done his hair justice at all. It's quite like, it looks like he's either just had a shower or he's just put like a mega ton of hair gel all over his hair. resist from doing too much in the hair. It just most of the time just looks wrong. So try and keep like the stuff you do there to a minimum. Would be my recommendation. I'm never quite certain how much I like clothes, etc. to put in. Still not quite right. I've got like very lean cheeks here, so I'll give them a pie. Do some more to his eyes. Sometimes I really like go in on the eyes and then sometimes I don't. Having like an air of mystery can be good. I think a lot of emotions in like, we think it's the eyes, but I think it's actually the eyebrows. Like the fine muscles around the eyes rather than the eyes themselves. And I think sometimes we think it's the eyes, but yeah, it's not, it's just the stuff around it. So yeah, pay attention to the shape of the eyebrows. Like a lot of emotions we have here, so if you build in some of the tones around the eyebrows, it looks like someone's doing a bit of scrunching here. You can, I think, exaggerate, and that sometimes has a pretty cool effect. There's often stuff you can leave out, but I think like the eyebrows and the movements of around the eyebrows, muscles around the eyebrows and the muscles around the mouth are really important. That's what I always try and like capture accurately if I can. So we're like using a different brush that I'm used to, I get like a completely different effect. It's quite cool really. Try and avoid having like just unbroken black. Often I'll come in like with an eraser and just kind of erase over areas that are just too uniform. Right, let's get our brush really small and try and get some of the details in. I think we're coming to the end of the drawing now. I am tempted to just get rid of that weird, whatever it is, toothpick. just trying to avoid the drawing from looking too mushy. When I say mushy, it means like looking like a little bit out of focus. Like if your drawing looks good from like here, but then when you zoom in, it looks a bit like all the edges are soft and mushy, then it's because you just need to bring some areas of like sharpness and focus into your drawing. It's not to say go overboard, you know, less is more. I think so. I was having some hatching here, so like using your pencil on a low setting and just scrubbing away at it with the tip gently. It can like help here sometimes. It's like sad tilt to his eyes, see if I can get that. I think like hopefully you're getting across that like, and it's frustrating I know as a newish artist. Like, the adjustments I'm making aren't that big, but I'm just kind of edging it towards a certain place. And eventually they kind of all the changes I make accumulate and come together in a picture I like. And the frustrating thing is like the difference between the drawing at like 20% completion and 80% completion, or at 90 or 100% completion, there's hardly any difference, like objectively, but yeah, like the 20% point just looks like amateur, and then it's those last like final tweaks that make all the difference. So it is worth it. You keep plugging away at your drawing until you're happy. Invest the time on those finishing touches because they really do make all the difference. You can always do it when you're sitting in front of the TV or something. That's why I do the TV on, and and as long as it's not something with subtitles. Don't watch Shogun and try and draw. That is my only advice, because you miss all the plot. But yeah, sticking on like a YouTube video, just drawing along to that or whatever, it's nice. Got quite like a strong cheek there, just trying to kind of get that. And it's like I'm doing some of those like scratchy lines just because it just was looking pretty mushy and I didn't like it, and so I just wanted to really move away from that. Really like how like it's building up these like marks and charcoals, giving like a really cool textured effect. I'm liking the way that it looks. really want to lose that, to be honest. I also like the way the drawing looks like he's quite sad. Even though he doesn't in the drawing here. Well, maybe he does a little bit, but he does, it's quite like subtle. Just kind of doing these like spinny marks. If I get some of that hair in. Doing my best with these brushes. They are pretty good, like Procreate does such a great job with like the default brushes, I think, and we don't give them enough credit. I think everyone naturally just watches these amazing artists on YouTube and think, oh my goodness, I must buy that brush that they're using because then I'll get the same effect. But I think it is possible to get the same effect just using the default brushes for sure. Just, I think it takes a bit more effort sometimes. So like established artists, I think, will often find like a brush they do like that just kind of makes that process a little bit easier. And it's a brush they're familiar with, I think, often. You know, I think it's good to mix it up sometimes. Right, let's see if we can bring some smoother areas. I like to save the smooth areas for some of the very smooth parts. So usually your skin is very smooth where it's stretched, so maybe around the nose you might see some really smooth bits. Sometimes on the eyeballs, around the edge of the, is that sclera? Is that the sclera? I'm not sure. Around there you might get some like really smoothy smoothness. But for the most part, especially when we're drawing eyes, I think it just works better if their skin's quite textured. Maybe if you're drawing like a young girl or very smooth, or a baby or something, you maybe want to use a bit more blending, I'm not sure. When you do blend, just be really careful, you don't want to lose your work. Tempted to just do like a tiny bit of highlighting. Add some eyebrow hairs. I'm still not super happy about his mouth. I think it's a good idea to leave out that. A little thing there, I don't know. I feel like I've not really done his chin justice. Let's just do a bit of chin time. It is so distinctive. It's just a bit dark. Look it back, and he's got kind of this shape here. Bum chin. Desperate Dan chin, what do you want to call it? This is a very fine chin, nothing negative. So that's pretty close. Let's see. Smudging around his lips. Maybe that a bit too light. Just adding some shade. I think if you're constantly like checking the whole drawing and adjusting and being aware of like that modelling thing and over modelling, comparing all shades of the face to each other, then you should get there eventually. You know? Because it's like an accumulation of work, really. Just have like patience with yourself. Yeah, pretty happy with that, I think. I don't know what you guys think. He looks like him. Let's just have a go at adding some more highlights. I did them before, but I'll just make them a bit more subtle. Just because he's got this highlight down his nose, which really tells me out about the form, I think. I think the key here is less is more. So I came with some very light highlights before, but now really careful. Do a bit of drawing. It's got a cool scar there. Let's see if it's a little scar. It looks a little bit like a acne scar. I really love that. People's faces. The distinctive little bits that make them who they are. Moles. Important. Don't leave them out, guys. I do sometimes towards the end as I try and get some really interesting like outline marks. It's kind of hard to explain how I do this, but I'm kind of pivoting and pushing my pen. And even with this pencil here, this 4B, it's kind of giving me the same effect as the pencils, the main draw pencils I use. So maybe try that, see if that gives you a cool effect. Go back to highlight layer. I'm going to add the highlight there because I can see there's already some colour. So it's the order of importance is first erase the charcoal, and then when you've erased it as much as you go, then you can add highlights on over the top if you really want. If you still have charcoal down, there's no point. You might as well just go to the charcoal first. So I think I'm kind of done. I'm pretty happy with the drawing. I could go further. I may go further as soon as I stop recording. This was going to be a really quick one and this ended up being quite a long one, so I apologise. Maybe I will speed up the video a little bit in the kind of developing stages so that you don't have to watch me do those stroke by stroke. But I hope you found this useful. I mean, I know I do a lot of the same videos now. I'm trying to get videos out there more regularly. If there's anything that you think you'd like me to tackle or go into in more depth, then drop me a comment or contact me on Instagram at KTMaveArt, and yeah, just send through your suggestions, because otherwise you're going to watch a whole bunch of these videos of me drawing people. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Good luck with this drawing. Send me through your version if you decide to tackle it, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks very much, guys.